Hey, what up? You know the face, you know the name, you know the voice. It's the one only Miss Thanksgiving DJ Drama live in Main Street Studios. Rocking with the homie Ill Will. The illest, like, illmatic, illest journalist in the UK. Y'all pay attention. Don't get mad, don't get nervous. Just get comfortable. Holla at me, one.
DJ Drama. Young nigga got jumping like joy. 200 on the floor. I'ma get it right back. Bottle section for my section. Then be flash. I'ma get it right back. For the cake for the bar. Bitch, I got it all. I'ma get it right back. I'm whipping my wrist to put rodeo wrist.
Now, with me coming from the UK, I mean, I was heavy on the mixtape scene back in the early 2000s, obviously when 50 came through, and I'm a massive fan of the southern scene, so I was a huge fan of like DJ Smallz mixtapes, and I always wanted to know when, like, you've now become like the voice of the South. I want to know when that transition happened, like when did it, that one thing, I don't know whether it was one mixtape or it was dedication or what, how did you become the voice of the South? And like, you don't really hear from Smallz that much no more.
Yeah, shout out to my man Smallz too. I actually just seen him the other night. He was he DJs for Yo Gotti. But yeah, in those early years, it was like, it was a friendly competition even between me and him, because I mean, between Southern Smoke and Gangsta Grillz, those were the go-to brands in Southern mixtapes, especially at a time when the nation was getting familiar with Southern mixtapes. It's interesting because this documentary came on the other day, Atlanta, The Rise, and one thing about it was, I think that someone like myself and Smallz as well, but definitely myself, when I became prominent within the mixtape game, I came at a time, there always had been a mixtape culture in the South. Clearly Texas had its culture. Atlanta had, when I moved down here, Jelly and Big Oomp pretty much had the mixtape game on smash. So I think my contribution a lot was to help, Atlanta mixtapes and just Southern mixtapes go national. I remember in my early years for myself, when I first started Gangsta Grillz, like, I would make phone calls to stores around the country off of the store list, and I would tell them like, yo, I got this series called Gangsta Grillz, this, particularly Southern music, and this was even before it was like a one artist series. Was when they were coming out like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. People were like, nobody's really, our consumers don't really buy South mixtapes, especially up north, and up north being where the mixtape culture lived and breathed for so long. So I just would tell them like, yo, let me send you a box and, just check them out. And, my product, I always took my product very seriously. So I made sure that it looked a certain way. And they started moving. So that's kind of outside. In Atlanta, it pretty much was like, I was just so consistent and so hungry. And, Gangsta Grillz in itself just became its own beast. When I created it, and I mean, point blank period, that's how I became the voice of the Southern mixtape culture, and just, and just the voice of the South. I guess it probably, I think that I was having success with the series as it was, and I remember one of the, clearly I have to give a lot of credit to Lil Jon. Lil Jon gave me Lil Jon was the first person to really give me a cosign to make people pay attention. He was the first host of Gangsta Grillz. And hence became the voice. And from there, the next couple tapes just had all the records that everybody was on. Gangsta Grillz 6 had Never Scared and David Banner Like a Pimp, and numerous other records that just in one compilation. And a lot of it, I have to admit too, the bootleggers helped me out. The bootleggers were hustling more than I was hustling, but I was happy at that time, at that point in my career, and just in general as a DJ, when the bootleggers got your product, you're like, I'm on it, this is good. I'll get it out there. It was a business card for me. My initial tape with not my initial tape with T.I., but the first ever Gangsta Grillz that was all one artist was T.I. and PSC. And I think that's when, for me, that's when it kind of became like, all right, there's a new sheriff in town. You know, that tape in itself was an Atlanta classic. It moved around the South. Tip was the man. Gangsta Grillz had some notoriety. You know, people were familiar. So when we got together, I mean, I said it on the tape. I was like, yo, you know, we're going to start a revolution. I remember saying shit like, this is only the beginning. You know, at the time, I just was kind of going with the flow. So that tape went into, you know, my meeting Young Jeezy. He was a fan of the series. He saw, you know, the attention that Gangsta Grillz was doing, and, you know, that went into me putting on a new artist that hadn't been familiar. Tip was already the man, definitely in the streets, you know. So when we did ours, it was like, okay, this is, you know, something crazy. The Jeezy situation was people were getting familiar with Young Jeezy's music off of Streets is Watching, the tape we did together. He became, you know, of course, we all know how that story goes, but at the same time, it leveraged my platform, my brand. And then it was just, you know, from there, I was, you know, my name was ringing bells. And a year later, we did the Trap or Die, which another legendary story. And then during that time, as Trap or Die was being put together, we were on the Urban Legend tour. I was with Tip, and he put me on the phone with Wayne, and you know, I don't think we had ever really talked. That was our first time talking, and you know, I was using Wayne's music a lot on my early series from the Squad Up tapes, and I told him let's do a tape. So Jeezy's tape and Wayne's first dedication dropped within like months of each other, or like a month. And I remember thinking like, you know, what the fuck am I gonna do after this Trap or Die? Like, what do I, you know, how do I top that? And then dedication became what it became. That tape was very impactful for Wayne as far as outside of the South, because the mixtape culture was such an up north thing, and when the consumers were going to the store and they saw the Wayne tape, that's when a lot of people really started to pay attention to, you know, where he was going with lyrically, and you know who he was to become. So, you know, I always say like 04, 05, 06 was my three-peat. And those tapes, from the Tip tape to the Jeezy tape, the Wayne tape was when, you know, I got the crown.
Okay, so I used to feel like your Gangsta Grillz tapes were popping off all the time, and now like you obviously a lot busier. I also saw you did that interview with Breakfast Club, and you were talking about it there. Is there something else coming? Have you got one?
A tape?
Yeah,
there's
always got a new Gangsta Grillz. Like,
there's always a tape, but now for me it's, you know, so much more. I mean, that's one thing about me, man. I can't leave the game. Like, you know, mixtapes are what got me here. It's what I grew up being such a fan of, or what, you know, entrenched me in the culture. And then, to be honest, right now it's big business. Like, you know, the mixtape game is as big business as any other part of hip hop in a lot of ways. And you know, I'm still at the forefront in a lot of that. So there's always a tape. You know, I love working with new artists. I mean, you know, I think one thing that's valuable about being a DJ is still being able to break new artists, and you know, that's what has in a lot of ways kept me in this position. You know, from last year doing a tape with Ty and August, and you know, then popping from, you know, and I'm in a different position because it's like, you know, people value my brand and my opinion, so there's always that. But then for me, it's, you know, it went on to become albums. So yeah. You know, I've done 4 albums. I'm working on another one, but it's just about outside of just another mixtape. Just, you know, keeping it all moving at this point. You know, so I try to wear a lot of hats. And as 2 Chainz said, it's the perfect grind. And see, I think that's where Gangsta Grillz has become so strong right now. Like, it works in a lot of the people's favors when they do it at the right time, like a 2 Chainz tape, or, you know, fucking, who knows, even Chris Brown, when he did his tape, when his album was cold, and then he said, all right, I'm going to the mixtapes, when we did our tape. Like, that's what brought him back, his tape, you know what I'm saying, point blank period. Now,
it wasn't so long ago, was it earlier on in the year that you became A&R at Atlantic?
Yes.
How's that transition been, man? Especially, you are busy as fuck.
Right. Like, it's fun. I mean, it's challenging, which is enjoyable to me because it's a new experience. I'm learning. It's something I've been doing on my own, but getting into an environment with people who have had so much success with, you know, delivering records and, you know, consistently finding artists and everything. Like, I'm finding a good fit for it. So it's been fun, man. I can't front, you know, and it's I'm very comfortable with the building and my relationships because they stem back in my own career. You know what I'm saying? So that helps me in a lot of favors, and it's brought a lot of energy to the studio. And again, you know, it's about collecting more wins. So you know, for me too, it's showing and proving. You know, because I've had so much other success in other areas, and you know, I like to try to find myself that when an opportunity presents itself or when a challenge comes, you know, I can deliver.
From a music standpoint, we had the lowest record sales since 1991 when Wiz's album went #1 with like 90,000. Do you think that
Since when? What year?
91? I think it was.
Since 91.
Yeah. And I think that the way that kids. Obviously, music in general is consumed completely different now with streaming and things like that. Where do you see it going, like in the future? Do you see them getting rid of albums altogether, and how are people going to consume music, and will it ever rise again as well?
I mean, I still think one of the most important things about an artist is delivering an album. Point blank, period. I mean, there's a lot of artists out here, single sell, but when we look at when we look at our strongest artists within the game, it's about the album. You know, it's about fresh ideas of how do you deliver an album and, you know, changing with the times. But I still feel like everybody wants to do an album. And everybody's success is measured on how their album did. You can do 1 million mixtapes or you can drop 1 million songs, but it's still based upon your album, point blank, period. And, you know, the biggest artists in the game, especially in hip-hop, you know, still deliver solid albums and sell numbers. You know what I'm saying? They're still out here. Now, you know, it's scaled down a bit, and there's a lot of different avenues to generate money and, you know, to keep fans involved. So I think we have no lack of creativity when it comes to generating within hip-hop and within music in general. And it's, you know, the kids are on, you know, there's going to be new ways, whether it's just through the phone, whether it's streaming, like, you know, the industry's going to find a way to create dollars out of that. But I did, my one of my bosses at my radio station, Hurricane Dave, just told me about a focus group he did. And it was like 25 people in there between the ages of, I think he said 18 and 25. And he asked how many people in here buy albums or buy music. And all of them, nobody raised their hand. And it was like it felt like, wow. They were like, what? Why would you buy music when you can get it off this program and that program? And, you know, so seeing on that, and they all have the music, you know, so I just think it's going to be, to me, it's always about keeping up with the kids too, and then evolving around that.
Do you think it's more a promotional tool these days for people to then go to the shows and buy merchandise?
Absolutely.
That's where the money's at.
Absolutely. I mean, the money's been there, and, you know, people, you know, the industry wasn't slow on that. That's why they started doing 360 deals with people, because you had to generate money in other avenues outside of music sales. So, you know, they saw it coming. Leo Cohen came to the studio on Walker Street that I once had, where our raid happened, and T.I. once had. And I remember this was when it was Tip Studio still. And this was like 02, 03. And he told Tip then, he said, it's content. It's going to be content. That's what it's about. And, you know, I mean, a guy like T.I. and somewhat, I mean, myself too, you know, he did. You know, when you see Tip, he has clothes, he has movies, he has television, you know, so many different ways, because it's the content. And for me, the same thing. Like when I think about all my hats I wear, or, you know, whether it's records or albums or music, radio stations, it's content. Like I keep myself relevant within the game in so many different ways, and that's why for me it's, you know, I never see myself leaving tapes alone, because, you know, it's the content, and it's the, you know, it's the movement of the music and new artists that always come.
Okay. In 08 you won a Ozone Award for the BG tape, right? Have you spoken to BG since he's been locked up? Have you gone to see him?
I haven't gone to see him. I haven't spoken to him. I hadn't spoken to BG in some while before he got locked up. He had been moving around. Around that time too, he was in Atlanta a lot. He was signed to Grand Hustle, and, you know, we shared the same studio at times while I was working on my album. But I had, you know, shout out to my man BG. I'm not sure how much time he gets, but that was a good tape, man. The Hood Generals tape.
Yeah.
It was hot.
And like speaking of BG, I was thinking because we were just talking about the Gangsta Grillz tapes. When BG gets out, I'm pretty certain Baby wants to get Hot Boys back together, do that reunion. Would you consider doing a Gangsta Grillz Hot Boys tape?
I would, definitely. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Like, that would be amazing.
I see that various DJs and producers who started out in hip hop are now moving towards EDM.
Right.
Green Lantern is one of them. Just Blaze as well.
Right.
Would you ever consider moving genres, or are you strictly? Oh yeah.
I'm all for it. I mean, but for me, it's just about being organic. You know, Green Lantern is such a creator and a producer. He's in his own way. He's one of my favorite DJs ever. So it makes sense. For his direction, and me and Green have had conversations about it, and I think it works for him and somebody like Just Blaze, and I'm all for it. Like, I mean, I'm a fan of all DJs and all genres and all music. So, but for me, it's just about, I guess, going organically into that transition.
You the one girl, something about them kids that you